Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Hart Bennett, and today I'm going to read my last chapter of my book, Seven Sisters, The Trek, the very last chapter, chapter 45, and I'll be all done. I'm excited. A thrill went through the saints as the trumpet was blown to start the wagon moving forward that morning. The Utah boys whistled and chirped at their oxen and cracked their whips in the air with unusual zeal. As the saints walked along the wagons, they were in a splendid mood and laughed and talked happily with each other, not realizing the sad, ironic fate of Samson Dibble during the night. Dorothy Dibble followed behind her wagon and held on to the back gate. When someone asked her how her sick husband was doing, she would just smile and say, "He's doing just fine." That seemed to appease them, and they went on their way. After walking a while with her sisters, Aunt Lucy excused herself to drop back and check on Sister Dibble. "How are you, Sister Dibble?" she said, hugging her. "I'm amazed that you look so happy." "I am happy, Sister Whittier. I'm so grateful that the leaders aren't burying Samson in that rocky canyon that I can't feel sad at all right now. And besides, I'm entering the Salt Lake Valley today. Samson would want me to be especially happy." "Do you have someone to stay with when you get to Salt Lake?" "I have my son and his wife who live in Sugar House. That's a little community south and east of the temple site. They wrote and said they had built a little house for Samson and me on their property, so we could live close by them. I guess it'll just be me living there now. It's a blessing that you have family there." "Well, I'd better get back to my sisters. We want to spend as much time as we can together before we have to go our separate ways. If I don't see you again in all the confusion of the arrival, just know I am thinking of you. You are a perfect example of the pioneer spirit, Sister Dibble. I really admire you." "Thank you, my dear. I shall never forget what you did for me." After the saints and wagons passed through the last part of Immigration Canyon, the narrow road opened up into a wide space, and the wagons rolled to the right until they stretched all along the top of the hill. The horn was sounded for the wagons to halt, and all who were walking gazed at the first time on the valley spread before them. The sisters, along with the rest, stood with their arms around each other and wept. What a sight! The Great Salt Lake shone like a sheet of silver in the distance. The fields were patchworks of golds, greens, and browns, where they had been harvested, plowed, and replanted for the next year. The homes and buildings were in a cluster in the center, with ribbons of wide streets laid out to the points of the compass. The foundation and several feet of the walls of the temple were clearly visible, with a network of scaffolding surrounding them. But the thing they noticed most was a steady stream of wagons and people coming up the hill to meet them. They could hear a band playing the battle hymn of the Republic and people singing, "Glory, glory, hallelujah," with passionate fervor as they marched along. It was thrilling. Everyone was reveling in the moment, but Caroline, who sat on her wagon seat, had thoughts that were far away. She felt very lonesome when she thought of her mother, her father, her dear sweet Nan. In England, she wondered if she would ever see them again. She couldn't help but shed tears, for she felt all alone in the world. She knew the seven sisters would go their different ways. She had no idea where she would be going or what she would be doing now that she had arrived. She wondered what her destiny would be in this new Zion place. She would press on and see what the Lord had in store for her. Leading the parade of people and wagons that were coming up to greet the saints were several carriages escorted by Minutemen and a company of Lancers in uniforms. When they reached the saints, they all stopped and finished their joyful song loudly. "His truth is marching on." Then the prophet himself got out of the lead carriage, President Brigham Young. "Three cheers for President Young," yelled Captain Andrews impetuously. "Hip, hip," and the saints answered, "Hooray!" Then two more cheers, and the saints clapped loudly. President Young wiped his eyes with his handkerchief. "It is I who should be cheering for you, dear, dear saints," he said. We are so glad to see you. God bless you all. Welcome, welcome. We greet you with open arms and enfold you in the love of the Lord and the gospel in this, your new valley home. You have endured privations and hunger on the plains, but you will never again feel the pangs of starvation if you do right and you live right. We have wagons laid with all kinds of food for your first banquet in Zion, and we have brought you some delicious watermelons to quench your thirst. We have plenty to go around, so please, when you are eating your melons, eat only the pink and not the green. The saints chuckled and went forward to the wagons, where plate after plate of delicious chicken, roast beef, vegetables, potatoes, and gravy, bread and milk were given to them. Then they spread out on the grassy park that had been planted especially for arriving companies of pioneers, so they could eat their first meal together, looking out over the picturesque valley. The welcoming saints mingled with the pioneers and introduced themselves. After they were fairly stuffed with food, the committee brought trays of watermelon wedges for all the eager children and adults who had never tasted anything like this before. It was a grand reunion for the saints, and even though there were very few who knew each other, they acted like they were long-lost brothers and sisters. President Young walked around and personally shook hands with everyone. It was overwhelming to feel the love that was shown by the welcoming saints. President Young then singled out Captains MacArthur and Andrews for a short conference, who in turn wandered through the crowd and shook hands and conversed with some of the men in the company. These men excused themselves from their family groups and congregated with President Young and his counselors, President Kimball and Richards. I wonder what those men are meeting with the presidency about, Lavinia broached. Caroline analyzed the group. It looks like he has singled out all the leaders and the captains. They're probably just thanking him personally for bringing the Dixie train safely to Salt Lake City, Susanna said, and giving them some last-minute instructions about what to do with us when we get to Union Square, added Aunt Lucy. Marcus is with them, said Susanna. Maybe he will tell me about it later. The sisters went back to finishing the delicious food before them and soon forgot about the meeting. After a while, the trumpet was sounded for the pioneers to get back in their wagons and for the welcoming committee to start back down to their homes. The seven sisters met back at their wagon and clung to each other as they waited for the horn to order them to move out for the last time. We made it, sisters, said Eleanor, all the way from England. After 4 months of intense physical, emotional, and spiritual testing, we're here. The sisters wept without restraint. It was exhilarating as Caroline cracked her whip above the oxen to get them ready to roll down into the valley. The sisters walked alongside their wagon with a spring in their steps and hope in their hearts. The captains and scouters rode proudly like sentinels along the sides of the walking company. When they got closer to the city, they were greeted by hundreds of Mormons who lined the sides of the roads and cheered the arriving pioneers onto Union Square. There were so many tears that the pioneers could scarcely see who they were waving at. President Tippett was grateful that he wasn't coming into Salt Lake City lying in the back of a wagon near death. He was very eager to see his wife and children. It had been over 2 years since he had seen them last. He had lost a lot of weight during his travels and illness. He was wondering if they would even recognize him. He knew he would be riding right past his home on 3rd East. He didn't know if he could stay in his saddle when he saw his family, but he knew he had to register before he could be released to go to his home. He started scanning the crowd as he got closer. Finally, he spotted Abby out in the front of their fenced yard with her one arm around her children and the other pointing at him. His heart leapt when he saw his family. They had all grown so much. There was his lovely wife, Abby, looking absolutely angelic through his bleary eyes. "There's Papa," Abby said. The older children waved frantically at him. "Papa, Papa, we love you!" Little John Henry clapped his hands, giggled, and smiled. President Tippett made a quick hand salute and smiled broadly as he rode past. I just have to register and then I'll be home, he promised. I love you all. The children beamed with joy. Then, remembering something, he looked back. Abby, he called, can you bring our carriage down to Union Square? I'll tell you why when you get there. Yes, yes, I'll bring it, she said, throwing her husband a kiss. President Tippett was so overcome with that small gesture of affection that he couldn't contain his emotions any longer. His shoulders heaved as he sobbed and rode on. Do you see Mummy and Edward? Phoebe asked Susanna as they got closer to the square. No, I don't see them anywhere, she said with distress in her voice. What are we going to do if they don't come to get us? Asked Fanny. We just need to be patient, twinsies. There are a lot of people on the square. Let's just pray they are here somewhere and they'll find us soon. At the square, there were bishops and other priesthood leaders sitting at tables under large canopies, waiting to register the arriving pioneers. From a foot-high platform in the middle of the square, a man spoke through a megaphone. Brothers and sisters, welcome to Zion. We are going to ask you to register this afternoon at one of these tables that is set up. Families should stay together. Brothers, we want to know your work history so we can place you in the proper employment. Saints traveling under the Perpetual Immigration Fund should register in that line over there, he said, pointing at the far table. The rest of you can go to the line with the sign that has the first letter of your family name. Again, welcome. The sisters looked at each other, realizing they were going to have to split up to go in the different lines. Then it was just a matter of time before they would be leaving one by one to go their separate ways. I can't bear this separation business, said Caroline, crying. None of us can, said Lavinia. Aunt Lucy looked around to see if anyone was paying attention to them. Then she thrust her right hand into the middle of their circle and whispered, Sisters? And the rest placed their right hand on top of hers. The twins loved this little ritual as they placed their tiny hands inward with the rest. They felt so grown up when they were with the seven sisters. Then all the left hands went on top of the right hands in pancake fashion. Everyone quietly chanted, 7 sisters, as they raised their hands up in the air. The saints around them didn't know what the sisters were doing until they heard 7 sisters quietly being pronounced in unison by the girls. The saints smiled as they realized that these 7 young women had stuck together for the whole journey without the benefit of parents or guardians to guide them or take care of them. They had been instrumental in working together on everything they were asked to do. They had been first to volunteer for distasteful tasks, and they had been a bright, positive light to the other saints. They had unselfishly tended to the sick and injured and uplifted many in their sorrows. They had been self-sufficient for the most part and held their own when it came to difficult situations. This called for a show of appreciation. Jane handed Lanny to her husband and started to patter some applause. Others joined her and gathered around the 7 sisters to pat them on their backs, shake their hands, and give them hugs and good wishes. We love you, sisters, said Jane, and I am eternally grateful to you for what you 7 sisters have done for my wife and little Lanny, said Hugh. We wish you the best of success and all the blessings the Lord can bestow upon you. Sister Schneider gathered the twins in her arms and gave them a smothering hug. You two made my journey bearable. Thank you for listening to all my stories. I'll never forget you. Where will you be living, Sister Schneider? Asked Susanna. I'll be going up to settle in Box Elder County. We'll write to you, Sister Schneider, said Phoebe. I'd love to hear from you. Just address the envelope to Aurora Abigail Moore, Elders Cherry Decker Schneider, Pinkerton, she announced. Pinkerton? You're getting married again, Sister Schneider? Asked Aunt Lucy. Yes, isn't it amazing? Captain Pinkerton said he took a liking to me ever since he helped me into the waters of the Missouri River to be baptized. And when he helped me find Myrtle and I fed him plum pudding as a reward, he said that was what sealed the deal. He asked me this morning if I wanted to marry him and settle down in a little place called Perry, Utah. Aunt Lucy had a sudden realization. You inspire me, Sister Schneider, she said. If you are willing to give marriage a 5th try, maybe I can think about giving it a 2nd try. Sister Schneider grinned. My motto has always been, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Everyone around her chuckled. As the praise for the seven sisters continued, they became speechless. They didn't realize they had influenced anyone on this trip. They were just trying to survive the best they could and do what they were asked to do. The adulation continued until the brother on the megaphone announced with agitation, "Brothers and sisters, we need you to get back into your lines so we can proceed to register you. Thank you in advance for your cooperation." This caused the saints to chuckle about getting sidetracked for the moment. Then they excused themselves and got back in their lines. "That was surely nice," said Lavinia. "Yes," said Caroline. "It made me feel like we played our part well on this journey." "Well, we'd better obey, sisters," said Eleanor, "or they'll change their minds about us." The sisters laughed and moved to their respective lines, waving when they caught each other's eyes. The twins couldn't hold still and bobbed around in their line to see if they could see any of their playmates. "Be sure to tell all the kids you see that we'll try to come to Salt Lake for October conference each year, after the harvest is in, and they should try to come then too," said Phoebe. Fanny's mind was clicking. "That way we can see them for a few days and maybe play some games." "Exactly," said Phoebe. "They might be too old to play games by then," said Susanna. "Well, maybe we'll want to play some adolescent games," said Phoebe, proud that she had used the new vocabulary words Susanna had taught her. Susanna laughed knowingly. "Yes, I'm sure adolescent games will follow." Caroline went down the row of tables to become the last person in the Perpetual Immigration Fund line. It had embarrassed her to take charity in the past, but this time she felt like it was a privilege to use this great program that was set up to bring the poor converts of the church to Zion. She had gone from being rich to being poor, and from being engaged to being abandoned. Then her parents rejected her, all in a matter of days after announcing she wanted to join a most wonderful church. Then, through a series of events, she had to rely on the Perpetual Immigration Fund to get her to Utah. Now she would find out how much money she had to repay. As she worked her way to the front of the line, the friendly brother sitting there took her information and asked a few pertinent questions. "Do you have any skills, Sister Cleverly?" "Well, I can ride a horse, shoot a gun, clean a prairie chicken, build a fire, cook in a bake kettle, crack a whip, drive a team of oxen, and do some nursing," she said in one breath. The brother looked at her in wonder. "Those are some good skills, Sister Cleverly." "How much money do I need to repay the church?" she inquired. "Well, it's going to include your overland trip from New York City to Florence for $23, and your transportation and food costs from Florence to the Salt Lake Valley for another $113. So you owe the fund $136. She said, a little discouraged. "That amount will take me a long time to repay, but I'll do it somehow." Just then, Hurricane stepped up to her side and surprised her. "Sister Cleverly, if you don't mind, I'd like to pay that amount of money in full for you right now." Caroline was shocked to hear these words from Hurricane. "You don't have to do that, Mr. Hurricane," she said to him. "You probably don't have a lot of extra money to spare. I can get a job and take care of it myself." Hurricane wasn't deterred. "I don't have a lot of money right now, except what I got paid for my services with the down and back wagons, but I have a lot of cattle down by Hurricane Hill outside St. George, and when I sell 300 of the 500 head I have there, I'll have a lot of money." "Why would you want to get a job to pay this money back when you could be taking care of our very large house there and raising our 10 kids instead?" Caroline's mouth dropped open. What are you saying, Mr. Hurricane?" "I'm saying, will you marry me, Caroline Cleverly, and come with me down to Hurricane to live in my house there and be the mother of our children together?" Caroline was speechless as her mind whirred back to her association with Hurricane. It was so naturally easy to be with him. They never had to worry about a lull in their conversation. They had such fun together. They seemed to agree on practically everything. He had shown a great deal of kindness and patience with her. Maybe she didn't have to give up on men. Mr. Hurricane, I don't know what to say, she stammered. Say you'll marry me. Caroline looked at him in awe and then ventured, Would you mind if I wore your pants once in a while? He laughed. You can wear my pants and my hat any time you want, he said, as he took off his hat and placed it on her head. Caroline smiled broadly as she straightened it. Then she dismissed all reason and spoke rather loudly. Mr. Hurricane, I would love to marry you. And she flung herself into his arms. Everyone heard this declaration, particularly her sisters, who screamed with delight and rushed to give her hugs and congratulations. Everyone gravitated to the couple and cheered and clapped their approval. Brothers and sisters, came the urgent voice from the brother on the megaphone, may I kindly remind you once again that to obey is better than sacrifice. And I need you to please get back in your lines and quiet down so we can get you registered and on your way in a timely manner. The saints and sisters laughed and sheepishly rejoined their lines. Hurricane pulled some greenbacks and gold pieces out of his pouch and counted out the amount of Caroline's debt. There you go, brother. Please mark Caroline Cleverly's debt, paid in full. The brother grinned as he took the money. At that, Caroline burst into tears. It seems like people are always having to pay for me. Don't you worry any more, Caroline, he said. Just remember that no one except me will ever be paying for you again. He picked her up by the waist, swung her around, and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Now, let's go find one of the brethren to marry us, so we can be on our way down to Dixie this very afternoon. Caroline laughed gaily and lovingly took a hold of Hurricane's arm. She waved over her shoulder at her dear, sweet sisters for the last time and left the square to start her new life as Mrs. Mahonri Hurricane Clark. As Susanna waved at Caroline and Hurricane, her heart sunk a little bit. Caroline was the first sister to actually leave the group. It brought to her mind that she and the twins were alone and hadn't connected with their ride to Cache Valley yet. I don't see Mummy or Edward, said Phoebe. Yes, this is getting serious, said Susanna. You two stay here and save my place in line. I'm going to go outside the canopy and look around. When she got outside, there were dozens of saints milling around. She flew through the crowd, looking at each face. All the wagons were lined up at the far side of the square, waiting for the pioneers to take their baggage off. She ran over to see if any of the people standing there around the wagons were looking for her. Then she spotted Marcus tending some oxen. Marcus, I'm so glad to see you. It doesn't look like my mother and brother are here to pick us up. What should we do? Marcus thought for a minute. They might be late. They might be late getting here. You just need to wait some more for them. They may need to take temporary housing for the night and leave word. You may need to take temporary housing for the night and leave word with the leaders concerning your whereabouts. Then, if they have somehow been detained or gotten confused about when you are arriving, I can drive you up to Cache Valley. It's on my way to Bear Lake. You didn't think I was going to leave you here to fend for yourself, did you? He teased. I wasn't sure what you were thinking. You haven't talked to me since that meeting you had with President Young, and who knows if he was calling you to another mission or to settle down somewhere in southern Utah or something. No, that meeting wasn't about that at all. President Young just wanted to personally commend the leaders for bringing all the saints to Utah. He said we had proven steadfast and faithful, and as a result, we were to be called by his authority to live the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. What he told us next was very surprising. He asked us to pray about the principle of plural marriage. He said if we got a confirmation that it was a true and righteous principle, that those who were already married were to show respect for their first wife by consulting with her concerning the possibility of bringing an additional wife into the marriage. If she gave her consent, then they together could choose another wife to join their family. This is called the law of Sarah, which honors Abraham's wife, who agreed to abide in a polygamous relationship with her servant Hagar, so Abraham could have children. Then President Young suggested that there were many unmarried sisters on the Dixie train who were widows or who had never married, and suggested that crossing the plains was a good measure of how faithful and true a woman would be in a marriage. He told us to look for a wife in our own pioneer company before looking elsewhere. These women needed good and faithful men to whom they could attach their name and live in honor and righteousness. Suzanne was aghast. So he called you to a plural marriage? No, no, he laughed. He was talking to the men who were already married. After he finished talking to them, he admonished us unmarried men to marry our first wife and not procrastinate the day of getting married any longer. He suggested that there were also plenty of young, unmarried girls in our wagon train that we should consider. He said it would be a boon to the church if these faithful girls could find husbands and settle down to family life and help build up the kingdom of Zion. And since I've had my eye on one of those tried and true sisters, I felt like he was talking directly to me. You have your eye on someone in the Dixie train? I surely do. I thought you knew. Suzanne grew worried. She thought he might say something about their future plans together, but he hadn't. Could he have found someone else? Well, I wouldn't want to inconvenience you to go out of your way to take me and the twins to our homestead in Cache Valley on your way to Bear Lake. Marcus could see he shouldn't prolong her agony any longer. Susanna, the girl I have my eye on is you and you alone. I plan to take you to Cache Valley because it would be a good way to meet your mother and get her permission to marry you. I don't want to have to wait until your father and 2 brothers arrive next year to get the go-ahead. Oh, I'm such a silly goose, she said, starting to cry. I forgot all about that. There has never been anyone but you, said Marcus, taking her chin in his hand, tipping her face up to his, and singing softly as he wiped away her tears. Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me. Then he kissed her forehead and embraced her lightly. She never knew she could love anyone as much as she loved Marcus. She longed to stay in his arms, but thought she heard her name being called. She suddenly realized she needed to come back to earth. It was the twins trying to get her attention. I'd love to stay here with you forever, Marcus, but the twins are holding my place in the registration line, and I need to get back. All right, my dear, I'll see you later. And one more thing. Yes, what is it? I love you. I love you too, she said as she walked away from him, turning to smile and wave every few steps. Lavinia was feeling rather lonely in her line until George came over to keep her company. So, Sister Triplet, where will you be staying? I've been told that they have a boarding house for unmarried women near the Beehive House, and I'm hoping to secure a place there. That is an excellent location. You will be right in the heart of the city, close to the temple construction and the endowment house, and close to the Salt Lake Theater, she said. Yes, indeed. In that meeting with President Young, he inquired if there were any musicians in our company. Then he invited me to be housed with a family of musicians. That will be perfect for me. I'll be staying a few blocks away from the temple with Brother Charles John Thomas. Do you know who he is? No, said Lavinia. He's the director of the choir that will sing at the closing session of General Conference tomorrow. Really? That will be wonderful for you. I can hardly wait to hear them. Maybe in the near future you could ask him about the possibility of me trying out for the choir. I'd love to sing with them. I'm sure they will accept you without hesitation, he said. Your voice is so magnificent. Why, thank you, she said humbly. But it sounds so much better when you are playing the violin with me. George turned a little red. I would love to practice with you on some new hymns I have swirling around in my head. Could I call on you sometime? Now it was Lavinia's turn to blush. I would love that, Captain Careless. George, please, he said. George, she said happily, and please call me Lavinia. Lavinia, such a beautiful name. It's like music to my ears. Lavinia blushed some more, this time with joy, for she realized that George, not Sir Evelyn, had the most important thing she wanted in a suitor, a strong testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'll let you get settled for a few days, Lavinia. Then I'll send a note to let you know when I'm coming for a visit. I'll be looking for the messenger. Until then, yes, George, until then. When Eleanor got to the front of the line, she gave all the necessary information required and then received a paper with her assignment for lodging. She was completely surprised and pleased to see that she had been assigned to brother and sister John Harvey Tippett's home. She smiled as she walked to where Aunt Lucy was receiving her assignment. Who will you be staying with? Aunt Lucy unfolded her paper. Brother and sister John Harvey Tippett's. Eleanor's mouth fell open in surprise. Really? That's who I've been assigned to. The two hugged each other joyfully and compared papers. Let's go find him. The two went out of the registration area and looked around. They soon spotted President Tippett's walking toward them with a beautiful lady on his arm. President Tippett's, Eleanor called as they approached. We've been assigned to come and stay at your house for our temporary housing assignment. Isn't that an amazing coincidence? President Tippett's replied, President Young suggested we, as leaders, help take care of the saints who are under our charge during our journey. So I said I had room at our house for at least 2 people, and I knew you two didn't want to be split up, so I submitted your names. Thank you, President Tippett, said Eleanor gratefully, and this must be your lovely wife, Abby. Yes, it is, he said proudly. Abby, these are the 2 sisters I was telling you about. This is Sister Eleanor Wise and her aunt, Lucy Whittier. So pleased to meet both of you, said Abby, smiling and shaking their hands. Aunt Lucy interjected. We promise we won't be a burden to you, Sister Tippett. We will gladly help you with your housework and tend your children in exchange for our room and board. Don't you worry about that, Lucy, Abby said. I'm just thrilled to have the 2 women who were the most instrumental in saving my husband's life come and stay with us. This warm response from Abby lifted a huge weight off Eleanor's shoulders. She now knew that she and Aunt Lucy would be welcome in the Tippetts' home. She was thrilled with how things were working out. She felt so secure when she was around President Tippett. Other than her sisters, he had been her best friend and confidant during their long journey to Zion. She was very happy to be spending more time with him and his sweet wife and family. We want to thank you again, President and Sister Tippett, Eleanor said with all sincerity. You are more than welcome, said Abby. Our carriage is waiting out front. Please, let us help you with your baggage.